What was discovered beneath Gene Hackman's estate is about to change everything you thought you knew about him. A cloud of suspicion already surrounded the deaths of the Oscar-winning actor Gene Hackman and his wife, whose bodies were found in their Santa Fe home. 3 weeks into the investigation, a federal technician pressed a ground-penetrating radar unit against the floor of Hackman's private library. The reading stopped him cold. A massive void directly beneath the room, a space that had never appeared on any building permit, property record, or inspection report for the estate. This anomaly triggered a warrant escalation, the deployment of a specialist team, and the most controlled information blackout surrounding any celebrity death in modern history. The story truly begins on February 26th, 2025, just before noon. A convoy of federal vehicles pulled up to a set of reinforced steel gates deep in the forests outside Santa Fe, New Mexico. Behind those gates lay a $4 million compound, the private estate of 5-year-old Gene Hackman and his 5-year-old wife, Betsy Arakawa. Nobody had heard from either of them for days. Calls went unanswered, and staff failed to arrive for work. The property, which normally operated with the precision of a small institutional facility, had gone completely dark. The alarm was raised not by family or law enforcement, but by a handyman. He arrived for routine work, noticed unsettling signs, and informed deputies he believed the couple had died inside. Entry to the compound had to be forced, with locks cut to gain access. A 911 call came in. Emergency. Hello, my name is Ron McGee. I'm the caretaker for Santa Fe Summit up here past 10,000 waves. I think we just found 2 or 1 deceased person inside a house. This wasn't an estate where a door might accidentally be left unlocked. Every access point was meticulously engineered to remain sealed unless someone inside deliberately chose to open it. Forcing entry meant either no one was capable of opening those gates or no one wanted to. Officers entered expecting a tragic but routine scene. An elderly couple, isolated, passing quietly. What they discovered was anything but. Inside the mansion, the bodies of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa were found, along with their dog. The medical examiner confirmed Betsy had died approximately 1 week before Gene, her cause a severe viral infection. Gene's death was attributed to heart failure with contributing factors. Natural causes, case closed. Except, the scenes simply didn't match the official paperwork. The Santa Fe Sheriff's Department publicly stated from day one, no signs of foul play. This is standard language, typically designed to quickly close a story. Yet, in that very same statement, they confirmed the scene was suspicious enough to demand a full forensic sweep of the entire property. No foul play, but federal teams equipped with thermal imaging. These two conclusions cannot coexist without a very specific, underlying reason. Furthermore, everything was locked from the inside. There were no signs of forced entry, and no initial signs of trauma on the bodies. Betsy had died a full week before Gene, meaning the 5-year-old Hackman had been alive in that house with his wife's body for up to 7 days. No call for help was made. No emergency contacts were reached, and no staff were on the premises. The perimeter alarm system remained active, yet the interior cameras had been manually disabled. What could compel a man to remain silent for 7 days in a house with a deceased loved one? Was it fear, a sense of duty, or the chilling knowledge that calling for help would mean letting strangers inside, strangers who might discover what truly lay beneath the fortress? To truly understand what investigators eventually discovered below this estate, one must first comprehend what stood above it. Gene Hackman's compound was not merely a home, it was an installation. Dense forests surrounded it on every side, punctuated by towering stone perimeter walls. motion sensors at every access point, thermal cameras, and 2 4-hour surveillance. Law enforcement sources, speaking privately after the investigation began, compared its infrastructure to that more commonly found at government black sites than residential properties. The staff were hand-picked, meticulously vetted, and bound by legal agreements so comprehensive that not a single one has ever spoken publicly about what transpired within those walls. Decades of employees, gardeners, housekeepers, maintenance workers, contractors, yet not a single account has ever surfaced. This kind of silence doesn't happen by accident. It is enforced. Local journalists attempting to investigate the property's history consistently hit dead ends. Building permit requests returned heavily redacted. Property records contained inexplicable gaps that county clerks couldn't account for. One researcher from the Santa Fe Historical Society spent months compiling land records on the estate, then abruptly stopped entirely. She ceased returning calls, never published her findings, and never explained why. No one knows what she discovered or who instructed her to stop. Even details like the discovery of the canine, allegedly found in a closet, hint at the murkiness surrounding all information emerging from the estate. Stepping through those formidable gates, the interior was extraordinary. Hallways were lined with original oil paintings of institutional quality. Furniture dated back centuries, with pieces attributed to European aristocracy. Chandeliers boasted documented histories linking them to pre-revolutionary palace architecture. The gardens were filled with botanical specimens so rare they exist in fewer than a dozen cataloged locations on Earth. Dr. Elena Vasquez, an architectural historian at the University of New Mexico, reviewed the property assessment as a consultant. She set down the photographs and stated plainly, "I've documented estates across the Southwest. This one was designed like a museum built inside a military compound. The aesthetic value was genuine, but so were the countermeasures. That combination doesn't exist unless someone is protecting something specific and something old." She was right. Beneath all of it, something had been waiting a very long time. Body camera footage, released after a judge's rare ruling mandating partial disclosure, shows deputies moving through the mansion's interior in the first hours after entry. The immediate silence was striking. Yet, what truly unsettled the agents wasn't the quiet, but the overwhelming evidence of recent, desperate activity in a house where 2 people were supposed to have died peacefully. Furniture had been dragged across hardwood floors. Books were pulled from shelves and replaced out of order. Drawers were left ajar. A bedroom safe stood open and empty. Someone had clearly been tearing through this house. Then, the agents walked into the library. This is where the story of how investigators finally uncovered Gene Hackman's secret tunnel truly begins. The first forensic sweep of the library turned up nothing. Agents meticulously searched the room for hours, finding no false panels, no obvious seams, absolutely nothing. The initial search team filed a report and moved on. The library was deemed clear. However, 3 weeks later, a specialist unit returned with a ground-penetrating radar system, the kind typically deployed for military construction surveys and classified facility assessments, not routine residential death investigations. The technicians swept the unit across the floor in a slow, methodical grid. On the 3rd pass, the readout spiked, revealing a void beneath the library floor. This was no mere crawl space or utility run, but a significant, deliberate underground cavity, one that does not naturally occur in that geology. That single reading changed everything. It triggered an escalation of the warrant to a federal level, brought in a specialist entry team, and prompted a secondary structural analysis of the entire estate's footprint. Within 48 hours of that GPR hit, agents had located the mechanism. an engineered entry point built into the wall, with a specific activation sequence invisible to anyone who didn't already know exactly what they were looking for. It wasn't a hinged bookcase or a latch hidden behind a painting. This was something designed to survive precisely the kind of search that had already missed it once. Behind the mechanism, a narrow passageway opened up. Stone steps descended into total blackness. There was no light source, no ventilation at the threshold, just a carved stone throat dropping straight down into the earth beneath the estate. The agents began their descent. With every step, the temperature dropped. The air thickened, damp and metallic, carrying the faint taste of rust and something far older. Condensation clung to the walls as flashlight beams swept across the rough stone surfaces. It was then that the first wave of true unease hit the team. The walls were covered in deliberate markings, not graffiti, not mere decoration, but precise inscriptions, carved with tools and clear intention. Some resembled alchemical notation. Others looked like technical schematics, blueprints for mechanisms that should not have existed in the era this tunnel was originally built. One section in particular featured what appeared to be an engineering diagram for a device with no modern equivalent: gears, chambers, and conduits in configurations that one forensic technician later described, in a document briefly circulated before being pulled from the case record, as engineering from nowhere. The construction itself told a layered story. Near the library entrance, the stonework was clearly mid-20th century. Clean cuts, industrial materials, poured concrete reinforcement. But the deeper the agents ventured, the older the walls became, revealing hand-carved joints and primitive reinforcement. As one commentator noted, this really isn't the ending anyone foresaw for Gene Hackman's life. Tool marks were consistent with picks and chisels, not power tools. Structural engineer Marcus Devlin, reviewing leaked photographs of the passage interior from his firm's office in Albuquerque, spread them across his desk, studied the deepest sections, then looked up. This wasn't built by the homeowner, he stated. The upper section was renovated and reinforced, but the core of this tunnel predates Hackman's ownership by generations. He didn't build it, he inherited it, and then he moved into it. Whatever Hackman inherited, whatever he chose to maintain and guard, it all led to one place, the bottom of those stairs. At the base of the passage, the tunnel opened into a vast underground space, a chamber sealed and actively used for decades. Ancient wooden crates lined the walls, stacked from floor to ceiling. Some had collapsed under their own age, spilling their contents across the stone floor in drifts of yellowed paper, corroded metal, and artifacts that appeared to belong to no identifiable era or region. Agents moved through it carefully, with the reverence one affords something fragile and potentially volatile. One agent lifted the lid from a dust-covered box and discovered photographs, fragile, curling at the edges, depicting faces no one in the room recognized, dressed in clothing from a century past. Some images showed clandestine meetings, groups of men in windowless rooms, their postures and intense expressions carrying the specific weight of people engaged in dangerous activities. Others captured locations, buildings, underground spaces, and exterior structures that do not correspond to any identifiable place in any current architectural record. In one image, a group of men stood around a table covered in maps. A single overhead bulb cast hard shadows across their faces. On the back of that photograph, written in careful handwriting, was a date, 1937, and a single word in a language that specialists brought in to examine it have not been able to identify. Leather-bound files sat alongside the photographs, filled with coded dates, redacted names, and passages describing events that appeared to have been deliberately removed from official historical records. Some pages had been partially burned, Someone had attempted to destroy them and either stopped or was prevented. Other documents bore watermarks and insignias linked to organizations that officially dissolved decades ago. The sheer volume of material was staggering. Agents estimated that full cataloging could take years, and they may not have been wrong. However, the photographs and documents were not what brought the investigation to a halt. What stopped it cold was at the far end of the chamber. Deep in the back wall of the chamber, past the collapsed crates and scattered files, the flashlight beams finally found it. An iron door set directly into the stone. There was no handle on the exterior, no visible hinges, just a corroded steel surface with deliberate, professional weld marks running along every seam, clearly requiring specific equipment and enormous intent. Someone had sealed this door from the inside, welded it shut from within, and never returned. The lock mechanism, investigators concluded based on its construction, wasn't designed to keep people out. It was designed to keep something in. The FBI has said absolutely nothing publicly about what lies beyond that door. No official comment, no background briefing to journalists, no unnamed sources, no leaks. In an environment where classified documents can appear on social media within hours of their creation, this level of containment doesn't happen without active, coordinated suppression. And active suppression, in itself, tells you more than any press conference ever could. As former FBI forensic analyst Dr. James Whitfield, who spent 19 years processing classified evidence before retiring, observed, when an agency goes this quiet, this fast, it means one of two things. Either they found nothing and they're managing embarrassment, or they found something significant enough that the disclosure conversation has moved above the investigative team. Reached at his home outside Richmond, Virginia, he reviewed the publicly available case details before agreeing to speak, and his observation is impossible to set aside. "I've seen both situations up close," he stated. "This doesn't look like embarrassment." The floor of the chamber was not merely stone. It was marked with intricate, precise, circular patterns. Viewed from above, these deliberate designs resembled celestial maps, star charts carved into the bedrock by someone who possessed an exact understanding of their craft. These patterns corresponded to specific astronomical alignments, constellations, planetary positions, and orbital configurations, laid out with a precision requiring advanced mathematical knowledge and a working understanding of celestial mechanics. Whoever carved them wasn't decorating. They were mapping something, or marking something for a future observer who would already know how to read it. The tools recovered from the crates were equally disorienting. Engravings, matching no known manufacturer or time period. Their internal mechanisms displayed a precision-demanding fabrication technology that simply didn't exist when this tunnel was supposedly built. One device, a palm-sized metal cylinder with rotating internal rings, appeared to have no seams, no visible method of assembly, as if cast as a single solid piece. Current metallurgical techniques still struggle to replicate that construction at that scale. Moreover, the iron door wasn't the only object in that chamber with military-grade specifications. The rivet spacing on the door matched construction techniques from high-security government installations built in the 1950s. As the saying goes, nobody builds a wine cellar like a bank vault. This brings us to what lay directly up the road. Los Alamos, the birthplace of the atomic bomb, sits approximately 56 kilometers from Hackman's front gate. The Manhattan Project, nuclear testing programs, black-budget weapons research, and Cold War continuity of government infrastructure. All of it was built and operated within driving distance of this estate. Freedom of Information requests have confirmed extensive underground construction throughout northern New Mexico during the Cold War era. How extensive? That remains classified. However, Retired Department of Energy consultant Richard Payne, who worked on facility assessments in this region throughout the 1990s, agreed to one statement when contacted at his home outside Taos. There are systems under those mazes that were built to outlast the surface. Some were decommissioned on paper, some were sealed, and some were simply forgotten, disconnected from every official record. The key word, he emphasized, being official. If Hackman's tunnel was indeed a forgotten spur of a larger government network, disconnected, sealed off, abandoned when programs ended and records were buried, then what we're looking at isn't just a private man's secret. It's something that predates him by decades, something he may have discovered or inherited or been handed, and something he apparently decided, for whatever reason, was worth spending the rest of his life protecting. But there were people nearby who suspected something was wrong long before February 2025. The neighbors, it seems, always suspected something. Margaret Calloway, who owned the adjacent property for 22 years, vividly remembers the sounds. Low-frequency vibrations at 2 and 3 in the morning. It wasn't plumbing or heating. It was something industrial and deep, something you felt resonating in your ribs, she told investigators. She once mentioned it casually to Hackman across the property line. He looked at her in a way she has never forgotten, then said quietly, "Some things are better left below the surface." She laughed it off at the time. She doesn't anymore. A retired geologist named Frank DeLuca, who lived 2 properties to the east, heard the same sounds. He even set up a portable seismometer one summer when the vibrations became regular. The readings didn't match any known seismic pattern. They were rhythmic, mechanical. Something was running beneath the ground on a schedule. He filed a noise complaint with the county in 2019, but it was never followed up on. Others in the area recalled unmarked trucks arriving after dark and leaving before dawn. Staff who departed the estate simply vanished, their phones disconnected, social media accounts deleted, as though they'd been methodically erased from public record. One housekeeper, who worked the property in the early 2000s, confided to a friend that she'd seen things inside she wasn't supposed to see. She never specified what, and she was gone within the month. During renovations that first exposed the tunnel entrance, workers discovered something else inside the estate's walls, a secondary communication system hardwired directly into the structure. Not a phone line, not an internet cable, but a closed-circuit system connecting the main house to the underground chamber. This old wiring predated modern telecommunications by decades, yet it was functional, meticulously maintained, and kept deliberately operational. A ghost line running completely off-grid, invisible to everyone except the person who knew it was there, who was on the other end, and what required a communication channel that the outside world could never intercept, never monitor, never even detect the chilling silence. The official story maintains that Gene Hackman died of heart failure at 95. Plausible, certainly the kind of death a man his age was always likely to have. But the paperwork utterly fails to explain why a couple with access to the finest medical care available chose to die in total isolation. No emergency contact was reached, no doctor was called, and no staff were on the premises. The interior cameras were manually disabled, yet the perimeter alarm remained active, as if someone wanted to see what was coming from outside, but needed to ensure no one could see what was happening within. 2 people, a sealed fortress, a locked chamber 12 meters below them, dying in silence. The startling truth is that the tunnel entrance in the library wasn't sealed when agents found it. The mechanism had been recently activated. Hackman, a man in his mid-90s, had gone down into that cold, damp passage not long before he died. What was he checking? What had changed? Or, and this is the question investigators have apparently stopped asking out loud, was he hiding from something he knew had finally found him? What often gets lost in the sensational coverage is this. Before the fortress, before the towering walls, the pervasive silence, the legal agreements, and the decades of enforced isolation, Gene Hackman was known as one of the warmest people in his corner of Santa Fe. His barber remembered him coming in every few weeks, sitting in the same chair, talking about Hemingway and the Kansas weather he grew up with. He tipped generously, double the usual amount, and remembered people's children's names. Vendors at the local farmers market knew him by sight. He'd buy green chilies in bulk and joke about his terrible Spanish. He wasn't a man who chose isolation because he disliked people. He chose it because something made him believe he had to. From the French Connection to Enemy of the State, Hackman built a career playing men trapped inside conspiracies they couldn't escape. Men who knew too much. Men with no clean way out. Perhaps that was never purely performance. FBI forensic teams are still meticulously working through that chamber, analyzing every artifact, decoding every document, and cataloging every symbol carved into those walls. Linguists, metallurgists, historians of pre-industrial engineering, and astronomers have been brought in to interpret the star charts on the floor. Yet, the authorities won't say a single word. Vague statements and surgically precise non-answers are all we've received months past the initial discovery. In any normal investigation, information leaks out. In this case, there has been nothing. The lockdown around that tunnel is tighter than anything surrounding the deaths themselves, which speaks volumes. Whatever lies beyond that welded iron door is not merely historically significant. It is operationally sensitive. Someone has decided those contents are still dangerous enough to require full containment. Not in 1950, not during the Cold War, but right now, today. Beneath the mansions of the powerful, beneath the forests and the quiet towns we think we understand, there are doors that were never meant to be opened. Gene Hackman guarded one of those doors for decades. He built his entire life around keeping it sealed. The walls, the cameras, the silence, the legal agreements, the staff who vanished, the years of total isolation. He carried that immense weight from the peak of one of the most celebrated careers in American cinema to the very last days of his life. Now, he is gone. The last person who knew every corridor of that tunnel, every crate in that chamber, every marking on those walls, is gone. And whatever was sealed behind that welded iron barrier, 12 meters below his library, is no longer his to protect. The investigators finally found the tunnel. What they found inside it may never be made public. The question isn't whether the FBI knows what's down there. They do. The question is, what could be so dangerous, so fundamentally destabilizing, that they would rather say absolutely nothing than tell the public what's behind that door? Was Hackman the last guardian of something buried long before he was born? Or was he its final prisoner?